crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Got a really interesting guest headed your way. Those introductions coming up, but first a couple of ground rules. Want to make you aware, in case this is your first time with us, all throughout the program, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see ways that you can join our conversation, call, text, email. Those numbers there for you. If you would like to text us, would love to hear from you, 205-670-1949, or you can call us toll free, 844-LAW-TALK, that number 844-529-8255. As we welcome in Josh Wright, managing partner of Hollis Wright, let's talk about the attorneys that are standing by, right? Good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you, too. You doing well?
I am. So attorneys, you guys have attorneys that are standing by live right now to take a call.
That's right. So if you call, text, or email, or even hit us up on Twitter or Facebook, you're going to get a live lawyer answering your question tonight. And that's just kind of one of the ways we pay back to the community to provide some resource to be able to help answer questions that are relevant and kind of pertinent to people's everyday life from a legal perspective.
Yeah, so take advantage of that. All throughout the program tonight, that opportunity is afforded to you, the viewer.
We are super lucky tonight because one of who I believe one of my favorite lawyers in Birmingham, and I have a lot of favorites,
you do.
But Barry Walker with Walker Law is one of my favorites because I've known him since I started practicing. We used to clerk together many, many years ago. He is a great American, a good person, a good Birminghamian. So I'm glad to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Josh. Very happy to be here. It's always a pleasure to talk about the law with you.
It's very difficult not to have a good time with you when you're with Barry because his personality is so upbeat and positive. It's awesome.
It's always a good day, huh?
It's always a good day when you're with Barry Walker. So I like that. No, so Barry and I go way back, but one of the specialties that he has, and he does a lot of things in his practice, a lot broader than just this topic, but he is an expert in the area of medical negligence and malpractice. And we're going to be talking a little bit about malpractice tonight. And Barry's going to be able to talk a little bit about how even though case filings have gone way down nationally in malpractice cases, medical negligence is still prevalent in certain circumstances. And, you know, we get calls all the time, and I know Barry does too, about bad results from a hospital perspective or a physician perspective. Bad results doesn't necessarily equal medical malpractice, right? So not all these cases are cases. Sometimes you have a bad result. You can have a bad result when you get a lawyer sometimes, right? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But first of all, Barry, welcome to the show, and so glad to have you back on again.
Thank you very much, Josh. Happy to be here. Appreciate so much what you and your firm do to reinvest in our community, and just keep doing it, man.
We'll
keep fighting the good fight, brother.
All right, talk to us a little bit about medical negligence. This is a specialty. Not every lawyer practices medical negligence. How did you get involved in this, and how did you build a skill set and an expertise to be able to do this kind of work?
Well, it's just because a client came in whose loved one had a mishap in the hospital and was permanently severely injured, actually an amputee. And as I did research and looked into it further, I discovered that medical errors had been made and that the amputation was preventable. And so these were great people, and I wanted to fight hard to make sure that they were compensated for the loss of that leg and the pain and suffering that ensued. And from that one case, I just cultivated an interest in the area of law, and I really have a passion for making medical care better and helping patients be compensated if they're the victims of medical negligence.
And I know that medical negligence, when you talk about malpractice, it sometimes is a polarizing issue legally and politically. Every result that someone gets that's a bad result, that doesn't necessarily mean medical negligence, does it?
Absolutely not. It's the practice of medicine, and some people can have so many medical issues and be suffering from a terminal disease like cancer, and just because an error was made in their particular case does not mean that that error was the actual and proximate cause of their death.
And talk for a minute, if you can, Barry, just about kind of how the standard is applied in these cases, where you may have a bad result, but someone meets the standard of care, they did what they were supposed to, but the result was not good. How's that standard? Is it a national standard, a local standard? How's that applied?
Well, it's a national standard of care. It's the what a reasonable and similarly situated physician or medical provider would have done under similar circumstances. So if the care was so bad and the result was so bad that most doctors wouldn't have done it that way, and if they had not, the outcome would have been better. That's how you look at it.
Now, in these cases, are you able to handle these cases without going to get an expert, or generally do you need an expert?
Absolutely not, because we're not physicians, right? And so in order to prove the standard of care and to determine what happened, we procure experts who look at the medicine and rebuild what happened. For instance, if it's a traumatic brain injury case, we'd have to go and get a neurosurgeon to look at it and figure out what the mechanism of injury was. And it's very expensive to do so, but worth it.
Yeah. You know, David, over the last decade to 15 years, case filings for malpractice cases have gone way down. Notwithstanding, insurance premiums have continued to slowly but surely rise to insure doctors. And there's always been a little bit of a disconnect there that lawyers have always kind of evaluated as why is that the case, but it just is the way it is right now. And so, you know, as long as there are medical issues out there, there are going to be lawyers that will evaluate those cases.
That's right.
Got a question here. I was told by an attorney that the proof is much higher in a medical malpractice case than with other types of cases. Is that the case? Is that true?
I would say it is, and we have something in Alabama called the Medical Liability Act, and so the standard of proof is much higher. You have to get experts to prove that there was a deviation from the standard of care. So both from a legal perspective, the standard is higher, and it costs a lot of money to support and substantiate your claim that your client was a victim of medical negligence.
Talk a little bit too about we talk in terms in this show of statute of limitation, the timing that you have to file a suit. That is a unique statute in and of itself in the medical negligence side related to the amount of time that you have to file a case, isn't it?
It is, and typically it's 2 years from the event or the medical negligence occurring, but we do have in Alabama what's called a discovery rule because of the nature of medical negligence and the fact that you may not be told you were the victim of medical negligence. Typically, an error is not made, you're not made aware of it. We have a discovery rule. And so if you discover sometimes after the statute that the medical negligence caused your injury, you have up to, I think it's 5 years to bring your cause of action.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, this is a good example. You want to get a lawyer if you know, there's plenty of medical circumstances where the doctor's doing it the right way. What Barry's talking about is circumstances where they're not doing it the right way, and that those cases need to be evaluated and properly vetted to determine whether or not there was a deviation from the standard of care. But in those circumstances, you don't want to try and go this alone. You don't want to try and necessarily communicate directly with the hospital to resolve your grievance and dispute. You want to get a lawyer involved to be able to evaluate what your statute is, whether you have a breach of the standard of care, whether there is a form of medical negligence, and whether or not you can be successful in a case. So that's why you go to someone like Barry to make sure that that's managed properly from the front end.
That sounds like a good plan. All right, it's time for us to step aside. We're going to take our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder of how active Hollis Wright is on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Great educational, informational resource for you there. You can also get clips of the show there as well if you ever miss anything or want to share that with your friends, especially a topic of discussion like we're having tonight. So we're stepping aside. We're coming right back. More of the attorneys straight ahead.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys. Hollis Wright, car and truck accident attorney, standing by right now to help you.
If you need help after an accident, contact the team of attorneys at Hollis, Wright.
Our law firm proudly supports Alabama high school athletics as well as the AL.com Hollis Wright Player of the Week.
Be sure to vote every week in the AL.com Hollis Wright Player of the Week fan poll.
Be sure to go vote this week for your favorite player.
Welcome back in to the attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Before we head back to our conversation and back to Josh to lead this conversation with Barry, a reminder, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live to speak with you. Free, off-air, confidential conversation. The number to text is 205-670-1949, or you can give them a call, 844-LAW-TALK. That's 844-529-8255. Josh?
All right, so Barry, talk just for a minute about informed consent, because that issue raises itself a lot in malpractice evaluations, whether or not somebody was given appropriate informed consent to be able to make a decision medically for themselves. Talk a little bit about that and how it is intertwined with an evaluation in medical negligence cases.
Absolutely. Informed consent is very important and essential. Your doctor needs to inform you and explain to you the procedure, why you need it, what your alternatives are, what your options are. There could be a less dangerous option to the one that you're undergoing, and you need to know that. And if you're not fully apprised of what your medical options are, and it leads to an injury that may lead to a cause of action, in part based on informed consent or the lack of the doctor informing you what your options were as far as medical treatment.
And in fact, a lot of times the informed consent may involve information and knowledge that you could have a bad result with this, right? So
Right.
some of these procedures are not necessarily always going to result in a good result.
Right. And that's why doctors should take their time, and frequently they don't. So you should demand that your doctor takes his time and tells you what all your options are, and make sure that you receive informed consent.
What do you see most often in your malpractice evaluations? What types of cases? And I know it's simple to say, well, medical negligence cases, but what area what sub part of medical negligence are you seeing the most? Is it informed consent or lack thereof? Is it just a malpractice action that caused a result? I mean, what are you seeing most often?
Well, I would say that quite often informed consent is a part of it, because in today's age, physicians don't have the luxury of taking the time the way they should be able to. But medical errors are frequently, medication errors are frequently what I'm seeing now. And it's usually a breakdown of communication between the systems within the hospital, whether it be pharmacy, nursing, and the physician. Sometimes orders are just mislabeled and mishandled. Someone gets the wrong order, gets the wrong medication, and it causes a serious injury or death.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, we've got a couple of our lawyers that do a lot of wrongful prescription cases where there is a breakdown, as Barry's talking about, related to the transmission of information from the physician to the pharmacist to the actual patient, and there can be a lot of different breakdowns. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is, and Barry talked a little bit about the Medical Negligence Act that we have in Alabama, the Medical Liability Act specifically. That Medical Liability Act is going to apply when you have medical providers involved, and that would include pharmacists. So those cases are evaluated under the same real standards related to the statute of limitation, related to what proof you have to provide, what experts you need, what the burdens are, when those cases have to be filed, where they have to be filed. All those things are evaluated, even in a wrongful prescription case, if it involves a pharmacist. So it's another reason you want to get to a lawyer like Barry to be able to evaluate these cases.
No need to how to figure all that out. A question we've got here: I was a juror on a medical malpractice case where the plaintiff used 3 doctors from other states as expert witnesses. How come lawyers do not use Alabama doctors as experts?
Well, it's just the culture of the practice of medicine. And so if you practice in the same city or same state as a physician, it's frowned upon for you to testify against them, no matter how bad their conduct was. So that adds to the expense of us having to litigate these cases, because we have to go out of state, sometimes very far out of state, to get a ethical, competent doctor to come in and talk about the deviation from the standard of care here locally in Alabama.
How do you address, Barry, the issue of is the malpractice culture in our country from a litigation perspective driving up the costs of health care generally? Because I know you probably get that a lot. I see it a lot when I watch the news.
Right.
What's the answer to that?
The real answer is, the simple truth is, there's no correlation between bringing medical malpractice lawsuits and driving up the cost of health care. In fact, what probably drives up the cost of health care more, and there have been studies on this, are medical errors in the hospital cost hundreds of millions of dollars in additional treatment after they occur. And so insurers raising their premiums is a business decision that they make, but there's no empirical data to show that lawsuits cause them to increase their premiums.
Yeah, you know, it's something I see a lot. We all see a lot. It becomes important during election cycles.
Right.
It's a lot of times you see it on the Sunday news when you see some of these shows. You know, we get it a lot on the personal injury side too, David, about, you know, the litigation. It's what's driving up the cost generally of insurance. And the reality is, in the litigation realm, only about 5% of the cases that are actually filed in the court systems right now come from personal injury related cases. And we're not even talking about malpractice. We're just talking about generally. So people don't recognize that. They're like, well, litigation is driving up the cost of insurance in our country. The reality is, the litigation is such a small component. Business on business litigation is really what's causing a lot of it, or folks that aren't paying bills, collection actions, those types of things. But litigation itself only takes up about 5% of the entire marketplace of those cases actually filed.
You make the case often that if you look at, well, on the flip side, due to some sort of a legal case or a legal action, the good that's come about, you think the same happens in this area? Are due to the threat of some sort of a legal action that it's kind of forced the medical industry to kind of cross those T's and dot those I's?
Absolutely. I have a case, which of course is confidential now, where I was told personally by the healthcare provider that the standard of care at that particular hospital was changed because of the cause of action we brought. And we were able to resolve the case and do a public good, because the healthcare provider, and it doesn't have to happen often, said, hey, we're going to change the way we do this so that doesn't occur again. So we always want and sometimes do make a difference in how people are provided medical care.
Well, and that's, you know, that's kind of the goal why you got into this area, right?
Absolutely, to help people. That's why we do what we do every day, because we want to make our communities better and protect people against needless harm and danger.
So talk, if you can, with me just generally about the standard of proof that you have to prove, and we've talked a little bit about it, and you addressed the kind of the national standard, but that's unique to regular litigation. Like if you've got just a regular personal injury case or a car accident case or a trucking case, the standard of proof is different in a medical negligence case, where your experts have to really heighten a standard in order to be successful, don't they?
Absolutely. The standard of proof in improving medical negligence is quite high, above and beyond what you would have in a typical personal injury case. And I think the term of art is substantial evidence. And so it's quite a burden to take on these cases, and we have to be very selective in the cases we take. We want to help as many people as we can, but when you think about the cost of this litigation and the high standard of proof, once we vet a case and start litigating it, you have to be very careful.
Yeah, and I know we're getting ready to go to break, but I did want to ask you this, because this you'll find this interesting. Of all the cases you evaluate on a yearly basis, what percentage do you think actually get litigated and filed?
1% or less.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy, isn't it?
That is.
So that just shows you how selective someone like Barry is in making sure that someone recognizes not only that there's medical negligence, but that you can be successful in that case. There are a lot of bad results out there that do not amount to medical negligence. Doesn't mean the doctor did anything wrong, but people don't understand that. And that's not a bad thing. That's why they come to lawyers, to have those cases evaluated. But I would say that statistic is probably pretty accurate across the board. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the litigation process and how these cases start from evaluation all the way to jury. If you got to go there, let's talk about that when we come back.
All right, we're stepping aside our final break of the evening. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Tyler Vale with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. Many people ask the same question: why should I hire a lawyer? While there may be some legal situations that do not require you to hire a lawyer, the clear majority of legal problems would certainly benefit from having competent counsel involved. To begin with, the law is complicated. Even experienced lawyers typically do not represent themselves in court. A solid case with clear liability can quickly unravel without the help of a trained attorney. Lawyers understand the rules of evidence and know how to properly lay a foundation to get critical evidence and testimony admitted into court. Lawyers are trained to recognize legal problems early on in a case and can help avoid pitfalls that unrepresented individuals may fall into. Lawyers can also increase the value of a case by getting experts involved to help prove additional damages that an unrepresented person may not realize they are entitled to. An experienced lawyer has probably worked on cases like yours and can give insight to negotiating a fair settlement based on recent jury verdicts and settlements that unrepresented individuals may not have access to. Another important reason to hire an attorney is because the person or business you sue will likely have legal representation themselves. Non-attorneys are generally at a disadvantage when squaring off against opposing counsel or doing business with another party that has legal counsel. The law is complicated, and an attorney who is representing your adversary may try to take advantage of it. Our law firm offers free case consultations that allow you to meet with us for free during a face-to-face meeting, where we can discuss the type of case you have, the potential value of your case, and your likelihood of success. This initial meeting can help you decide whether you need to hire a lawyer. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WBTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Just under 6 minutes remaining in the show. So if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis Wright, you got about 6 minutes to do so. Josh?
All right, so Barry, I want to go through this because I think it's important to give context to those that are viewing. If someone comes to your office with a potential complaint of medical negligence, from the time they get there until you get to a jury, if it ever gets there, to kind of explain to me, what process do you use to evaluate that case and determine whether or not it's litigation worthy or not?
If you come into my office for a med-mal intake, we block out about 2 hours of time. It usually doesn't take that long, but just in case, because from the beginning, we want to get a painstaking chronology of what happened, and I ask people to come in with a chronology if that's possible. So if we decide we want to go further, we'll start procuring the medical records. Once they're procured, and that may take 30 to 60 days. We index them, review them in-house, and then we have to send them out to the appropriate expert to see if they can determine, as we believe, that there's a deviation from the standard of care. That might take another 30, 60, 90 days. And then after that point, we'll put everything together and file it if we've deemed it to be litigation worthy. And so it's not a quick process, but out of necessity, it has to be thorough.
Well, and it sounds like, you know, you've got folks in-house that are helping you evaluate the medical records, but you've also got to send those out to experts to determine whether or not there is, in fact, a deviation of the standard of care.
Absolutely. We try and keep a nurse in-house, and that's challenging sometimes, but if we don't have one in-house, we have someone locally we work with to put the medical records in chronological order and just do a merit review initially before we send them out to an expert.
Yeah, this is not something you can do on your own. You need a lawyer involved that's going to be involved in evaluating those cases without question.
A question we've got here, is there a state board who can deal with complaints against doctors and then they have a follow-up? And if so, why is the number of disciplinary actions against doctors so low?
Well, yes, there's a state board of medical examiners, and it's just the culture of medicine that is just a very close and closed fraternity. And there are probably 1% of doctors in every state that are written up by their medical board because it's made up of doctors, governed by doctors, and I would assume they just have decided to be very lenient about penalizing their members, even though it's about health and someone's life. Yeah.
I see a lot of people ask this question. If I consented through signing off on documents at the hospital to a procedure, am I prevented from arguing that someone committed medical negligence. Can you address that?
Well, I mean, technically, yes. If you signed an informed consent waiver, then the understanding is that you read the document and it explained what the risks are, and you may be precluded from bringing a cause of action, but not necessarily, because if it doesn't tell you about optional procedures and the risk involved, you may be able to overcome that signed informed consent notice.
Another reason why you want to get to a guy like Barry Walker,
Right.
to be able to evaluate those things. There are a lot of different areas, as I've learned over the years in my practice, that involve the Medical Liability Act.
Right.
For example, we talked earlier about pharmacists.
Right.
You've got physical therapists that can, nurses, hospitals, doctors. It's pretty broad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is unduly broad, and of course was, I guess, lobbied for by doctors with our legislature. So anything having to do with healthcare, they try and put it under the Medical Liability Act, and it restricts our ability to effectively prosecute these cases in terms of the discovery we can get.
Yeah. We've got less than 2 minutes remaining, so time enough for a final thought from the both of you. And Barry, if you would, you go first, please, sir.
I would just urge everyone in our community that if you feel you've been a victim of medical negligence, consult with a lawyer as soon as possible. Don't wait, because if ultimately you don't have a case, then fine. But time is your enemy in this process, and you need to get with lawyers like Josh Wright or myself as soon as possible to have your case evaluated and protect your rights.
Yeah, and I would just say we've highlighted today how the standards are higher from traditional litigation under the medical negligence standard and Medical Liability Act. Getting a lawyer early and quickly to evaluate a result is super important. And we've also highlighted, and this needs to continually be highlighted and underscored and bolded, that not every unsatisfactory result that you have is going to amount to medical negligence. And sometimes folks that come in and had a bad result don't understand that, and they need to talk with a lawyer to understand, why is that the case? Why is it that I had a bad result and this is not what I expected and this happened? That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a deviation in the standard of care. So it's critically important that you have a lawyer evaluate these cases on the front end to help lead, guide, and direct you through the process if you have been, unfortunately, subject to medical negligence.
Great advice.
Great job, man.
Great
Thanks,
show.
brother.
Good job.
Thank you.
Really great conversation from the two of you. Appreciate you joining us, and you as well. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Attorneys. As we wrap things up, how you can get in touch with Hollis Wright. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.